Welcome to the set of devotions on the attributes of God. I've already said that God is knowable, that God is uncreated and eternal, that He's unchangeable or changeless. Today I'd like to talk about the spirituality of God, the fact that God is a spirit being. John 4 verse 24 says, God is spirit and His worshippers must worship Him in spirit and in truth. Now, God's substance, God's being, is very different from ours. This watch is made up of steel substance. The stuff of this watch is steel. This garment is made up of cotton stuff and woolen stuff. The substance of this fence behind me is wood. Now, God's substance is spiritual. It's a spirit substance, very different from our substance. Our substance is flesh stuff. God's substance is uncreated. Ours is created. It's made. God's substance is eternal. Our substance is temporal. At least the flesh part of us is temporal. The spirit-breathed part of us, that's eternal. God's substance is spirit. Ours is flesh. Now, the spirit realm is more substantial, more solid, more significant than the natural or physical realm. We can pass through air because our substance is more solid than air. I can swim through water because my physical substance is more dense than water. Now, when Jesus was resurrected from the dead, His disciples were in a room very anxious and fearful, and He appeared to them by just passing through the wall because His spirit substance was more substantial, more solid than the wall. Now, that's something to contemplate and meditate on, that the spiritual world is more significant, more substantial, more solid than the natural world in which we find ourselves. Now, if God is spirit, first of all, that means that God is immaterial. Now, when I say He's immaterial, I don't mean that He's unimportant or valuable. Of course, God is the most valuable, the most important being in the universe. But when I say God is immaterial, that means God is not limited to a physical body. God doesn't have a height that we can measure or a mass that we can weigh. He doesn't have eyes as we have eyes. Or the Bible talks about the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth to find the one whose heart is complete in Him. And the Bible talks about His ear is not heavy that He cannot hear, or His hand short that He cannot save, and His right hand has spanned the heavens. So that's to explain to us metaphorically what God is like. But God is not limited to a physical body as we are. The Bible similarly talks about God having wings and feathers, that we hide under the wings of the Almighty. And Jesus came to gather Jerusalem under His wings as a hen would gather her chicks. God is not limited to a physical body. Of course, God can see. God can see everything all at the same time. He can see into everything and see through everything. God can hear the detailed sounds of the entire universe. He can hear over 8 billion people on earth speaking at the same time. He can even hear the quiet sighs of their hearts. God can hear every detailed sound of the insects in the entire world, and even the sounds that are under the ocean. God can hear, God can see, God can act, but He is not limited to a physical or material body. Secondly, if God is spirit, that means God is invisible. Colossians 1 verse 15 says, the Son is the image of the invisible God. 1 Timothy 1 verse 17 says, now unto the King, eternal, immortal, invisible, the only wise God, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen. So, how do we get to know this God if He's invisible? First of all, He reveals Himself through creation, through nature. Psalm 19 verse 1 says, the heaven declares the glory of God, and the firmament, the earth shows His handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night pours forth knowledge. There's no language nor speech where the voice of creation is not heard. Secondly, we're dependent on biblical revelation to discover who this invisible God is. And thirdly, Jesus came to reveal the Father to us. The incarnation is where the invisible God was made visible through the coming of Jesus Christ. In Hebrews 1, verse 1 and 2, it says the following: In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways, but in these last days He's spoken to us by His Son. The third aspect of God being a spirit being is that God is infinite. God is limitless. God has no physical boundaries. Of course, God has moral boundaries in that God cannot sin. God only tells the truth. He is bounded by His holiness and His attributes morally. And I'd like to talk more about that when we talk about the greatness of God, as we consider the infinity of God, as we look at the greatness of God. But for now, I'd like to conclude again with John 4, verse 24. God is spirit, and His worshippers must worship Him in spirit and truth. And 1 Timothy 1, verse 17. Now unto the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only wise God, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen. Enjoy worshiping this great, wonderful God. Take care. God bless you.